Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate it. We have some news to report today, and so I think it's significant and relevant given today's anniversary. Today marks the 2-year anniversary of the Memorial Day tornadoes that touched down here in Montgomery County and through a number of communities and counties throughout Ohio on May 27, 2019. A record number of tornadoes touched down here in Ohio that night, but the most devastating was a violent EF4 tornado that left a path of destruction 19 miles long through several Montgomery County communities and several densely populated neighborhoods. The damage to homes and businesses was vast, resulting in millions of dollars in lost property value. This morning, I can report that through the community's perseverance and 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears, we have recovered more than 90% of that lost value. Almost immediately after the storm passed, my staff and I realized we were in a unique position to assist in determining the extent of the storm's damage. The auditor's office was in the midst of updating property values throughout the county, so we already had boots on the ground and resources available that we were able to use to identify and survey the damage to property. Using our geographic information system and aerial images that were taken before and immediately after the storm, we were able to create a digital map of the storm's track and identify the properties that lie within that path. Recognized as an invaluable tool, this award-winning map and our survey became the most comprehensive resources available documenting the storm's path of destruction. These tools allowed us to determine that damage from the storms caused 2,640 properties in Montgomery County to lose $85 million in property value. My office continues to be in a unique position to monitor recovery efforts along the path of destruction, and today I can report that 69% of the properties that were damaged, more than 1,800 properties, we have found repaired or reconstructed. More than $76.5 million in lost property value, 90%, from the Memorial Day storms has been restored in Montgomery County. Just in the last 12 months, the county has seen great recovery, despite the pandemic. A year ago, only 27% of damaged properties were reconstructed, and only $27 million in property value had been recovered. Since then, more than 1,100 properties have regained $49.7 million in value, almost $50 million in value just in the last year. Trotwood and Harrison Township, the two communities that were hit hardest by the storms, have experienced a considerable amount of recovery in terms of value. Trotwood has regained $24.5 million of the $29.9 million in property value it lost in the storms, a recovery of 82%. And Harrison Township has recovered $20.1 million of the $23 million that it lost, a recovery of 87%. The city of Dayton has recovered 89% of the value lost on 331 properties reconstructed. Some communities that were in the storm's path have recovered more value than they initially lost from the storms. Perry Township, Brookville, Vandalia, and Butler Township each have experienced restored property values that exceed the amount they originally lost. We are finding values on newly constructed properties exceed the value of these properties before they were damaged by thousands of dollars, an average increase between 14 and 25% depending on the community. So that is why you see we've got 90% recovery on 70% of the properties. So while we recognize and celebrate the progress that has been made, we know that there is more work to be done and we still have a long way to go. We don't want to lose sight of that. 31% of damaged properties remain in need of repair or reconstruction. 31%. And we hear and read in the media many stories of families who, 2 years later, are still not back in their homes and are facing a variety of challenges. We know, and we said at the time, that it would take years for our communities to fully mend from the storms of Memorial Day 2019. But we see progress in every wall that is raised, every roof that is repaired, every window replaced, and every tree replanted. With every home that is reoccupied and every business that reopens its doors, we get one step further along the path of recovery. Together we are Dayton Strong. If you want to support our community's recovery efforts, I invite you to contribute to the Greater Dayton Disaster Relief Fund with the Dayton Foundation, which continues to support long-term recovery operations group. They are working one-on-one with families, providing whatever help they need to help them rebuild their properties and to get back on their feet. So let me talk about this map. I'll take some questions, but before I do that, let me talk about the maps a little bit. Will this help me?
They're just kind of rotating.
They're rotating? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. We're in the middle here. That won't do anything.
This won't help me at
That
all?
won't help you. Just give it 1 second, it'll be back on the first one here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Josh, you're real familiar with this because you walked this path, right? But this is the path of the tornado. The green identifies the properties that have been reconstructed. The yellow identifies properties that are waiting to be reconstructed or have not been reconstructed. And this one zeroes in on the area of the county that was most heavily damaged, the area between Harrison Township and Trotwood. So it's going to take me back to the beginning here in just a minute. So the one thing that shows, I think, along the path here is that there's no one area that's where the reconstruction is concentrated, that the reconstruction is pretty, what we've seen is pretty widespread across the path. Same thing with the areas that need to be reconstructed. It's still, those are open along that path, and there's still a variety that needs to be done. This area in Harrison Township, so this is that Wagner Ford Road area, going through the township and then to the edge of Trotwood. This was where we saw the most heavily damaged properties in the community, and I think some of the most visible properties, again, because it's along I-75 where it can be seen. It's along Dixie Highway where those properties could be seen. And so we wanted to zero in on that property to show that, yes, there's been a lot of reconstruction, but as you can see, there still remains a lot to be done in those areas. And again, those are areas that are very visible to the public, and so we know that they're curious what's going on there. A lot has been done, but there remains a lot to do. So with that, I'll take some questions.
What kind of properties are we talking about? Are these mostly residential?
It's mostly residential. And as you know, most of the properties that were damaged were residential. But particularly in Harrison Township, where there was a lot of commercial property in Harrison Township that was damaged. A lot of it, it's a shopping center there on the Dixie Strip that remains down, has been removed. The site's been cleared. The hotel at Wagner Ford Road, that site has been cleared. So there's some commercial areas like that have been, the properties have been raised, but there hasn't been any reconstruction there as of yet. So most of what we're seeing in terms of rebuild and reconstruction is in the area of residential.
And this loss of the tax base, especially Trotwood and Harrison Township, is that enough to have an appreciable impact on their budget, or is that?
Well, we haven't done those dollars yet, but certainly it's going to have an impact, and a positive impact, because these are new construction dollars that will be added revenue source to them. When they lost that money, it was money that was taken away. This money will be returned to them. So it's not one of those situations where, because the property value declined in the past, during the housing crisis, for instance, when property values declined and they lost revenue as a result of that, then that loss was permanent. This, because it was as a new construction, and it was originally a deconstruction, and now a new construction situation, this will result in additional revenue for those communities. We have not put dollars to that as yet. I'm sure, though, I will be hearing from officials in Harrison Township and Trotwood in particular, because they were the ones that were most heavily impacted by the storm.
So, and their internal numbers are a lot smaller. Like they have, that they are mostly rebuilt, and so you guys have a lot of properties that still have lost value. Is there a reason why there would still be some that have lost value, even though they have been repaired or rebuilt? Is there a reason for that? Or
well, there's a lag in some of our reporting. So when we cut off new construction in mid-year of 2020. So there's a lag in some of that we haven't picked up. So Trotwood may be picking up some that we have not seen as yet.
So this may not contain things that were done this spring.
Correct. Yeah, we're reporting what's happened during the tax year, and we run behind.
The loss of trees, does that impact property values? Like when you look at these neighborhoods with loss of these trees?
It doesn't. It's not something that we would determine as a factor in determining the value of the home, but certainly it impacts the sell price. It's an amenity that when you go to sell, a lot of people will sell that property and promote the fact that it's in a forested area or they have mature trees. So it's one of the communities. I know when we met with folks up in the DeWeese Parkway area, it was one of the concerns they had. They lost a considerable amount of mature trees, and I remember specifically one gentleman telling me that he'd lived there for 20 years or more, and he'd never seen the sun set because the trees always blocked that. Well, now the sun is coming into his house. So it gives a different appearance to the whole neighborhood. And so it will impact, I think, property sales and the prices that people get on their properties, and would have an impact long-term on values from that perspective. But we wouldn't consider damage to trees or shrubs or landscaping as a factor impacting value.
But it could impact the sales, which would then impact the value.
Eventually, yes.
What are some things that your office is doing to help those who are having difficulty paying these property taxes?
Well, one of the things we did back immediately after the storms is that we reached out to property owners, because if they had damaged or destroyed property, they could apply to us and have their taxes reduced based upon the amount of damage they had to the property. So we did a pretty extensive campaign to reach out to people. It was difficult to reach people because they had been dislocated from the community or dislocated from their homes, so we had a difficult time reaching people. It was difficult too because in order to qualify for the reduction, you had to fill out an application form, and that form had to be notarized. So we did remote locations around the community to try to reach people. We had several people from my office who took the notary exam, so we would have notaries available. I even drug my wife out on occasion because she's a notary, and she notarized the forms for us. So we did that, but we did reach everybody. So we came back in the next year and reached out to folks that had not filed those forms, and said, well, you could file a Board of Revision case, because you have a case with the Board of Revision. You've had destroyed property, and you could go that route. And so we did reach several hundred people through that route as well. Now, I'm happy to say that there's been a legislation introduced in the Ohio General Assembly that would allow auditors to lower value based on a natural disaster without having to go through the process of having the taxpayer, the homeowner, file a form and have it notarized. They can do that. They can do that on their own, but the auditor would have the authority to go ahead and do that without going through that process, which we would have really welcomed. I mean, it was, we had thousands of properties, some of them completely destroyed. This was, these were no-brainers, and there was no reason why property owners should pay taxes on property that wasn't there anymore. So we've supported this legislation. It has passed through the Ohio House and is waiting. It is pending in the Ohio Senate. We're hoping that, again, it doesn't do anything for this go-around, but it certainly will help in the future. But there will be some problems going forward, and I guess I'm going to go ahead and mention this, because there will be some issues going forward. As I mentioned, these properties that are being rebuilt, on average, are valued at 18, 20, 25% more than they were before. Will that have an impact on their tax bill? It will, and so the property owner that was living there before was paying on taxes on a value, less than what they have now. So that may put an additional burden on them, and so those are issues that we're working through with people too.
Do you have any idea the ones that aren't rebuilt, or how many of those are out-of-town property owners?
I do not know. We can probably find that out.
Interesting.
We can find that out. We have a database of all the properties that have been built and rebuilt and unbuilt. So any of that type of information that you might have, we can probably generate that for you. Any other questions? Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for coming this morning. I appreciate it.